In this lecture, we will learn how to use Docker volumes for SQL Server so that our database becomes persistent. This will save our database even on container crash. You can see this is my Docker desktop and this is the command prompt from where I will run the Docker command. The Docker command to run a SQL server from a Docker container is the same old command which we ran in the previous lecture, nothing new to it. So this is the command, and now I will add the volumes to this command. So before -d flag, I add -v flag for volumes and give the volume name as SQL volume. This name can be anything. Then write :var/op/mssql /var/op/mssql is the default path of SQL Server where the database files and configurations are kept. So I have mapped this path to a Docker volumes. This will keep the SQL data along with the database in a Docker volume rather than in a container. So this will save our database even when the container crashes. Click enter and you can see that the SQL Server is now running from a Docker container and the volumes is attached to it. Let's connect to this SQL Server from Visual Studio. Here click the connect button given on the SQL Server Object Explorer. Here server name should be the same which we wrote in the command. This is localhost, 1440. Then we have to write the password. It is better to copy it from the command itself. So I have copied and pasted it on the password text box. Let's connect it. We are now successfully connected to the SQL Server and it's time to add a new database. So right click on the database node and select add new database. I name it employee. Now I will add a new table to it. So I right click the table node and select add new table. Let's add a few fields to this table. ID is already added. Next field I add is name and put the type as varchar 50 and then uncheck the checkbox which says allow null. Final field I add is the designation field and provide it the type varchar 50 and uncheck the allow nulls checkbox. I have to give the table name on the below section. So I give the table name as EMP details. Then on the top you will see the update button and we have to click the update button to update the database. The update query is running and it's now successfully performed. Let's open the table and add few records to it. First I refresh the database, but unfortunately there is some error going on, and this error is because I have to close the previous table window first and then refresh the database. Let's do it again. Now you can see the table is displayed and we right click on it and select view data. Let's add a few records to it. The records can be anything of your choice. I add some test records to it. These records are RAM, manager, Sham, coder, Sita, tester, and Geeta HR. Now all the records are added. On Docker desktop, this is the SQL Server running from a Docker container. It contains the employee database and the volumes are used for it. So our database is saved from the data losses in case of container crashes. Now let us test if the database is really persistent or not. So I delete the SQL Server container. Next I go to the command prompt and run the same docker run command which I ran earlier. So this is the command and I press enter. The command creates a new container for the SQL Server and the container you can see is running perfectly. Let's check it on Visual Studio. So I disconnect the previous SQL Server and reconnect it. The connection properties remains the same as before. Click the connect button. I am now connected to the SQL Server. Let's check the database. There it is. The employee database is restored by the Docker volumes. Let's check the records on the table. We can see all the records are safe. So this means now our database is indeed persistent. The database sits safe on the Docker volume and it will not be deleted even if the container crash. Let's open the volumes on the Docker desktop. Go to the data section. You will find all the databases in the SQL Server. This is the employee database and you can see its MDF and LDF files. We can download them by right clicking on the data node and select save as. A zip file will be downloaded and it will contain all the databases and all the SQL files. Inside the zip file you can see the database files of the employee database. It's now time to implement the Docker volumes on our Docker Compose movie database app, which we created in the previous lecture. This is the Docker Desk Compose YML file. You can see on the Docker desktop the containers of the app are created automatically by the Visual Studio. Since we have not mounted the volumes on the SQL Server container which this app needs, so we have to delete the containers first and then respin new containers for the app with volumes mounted to the SQL Server container. So I am deleting the container of the apps from the Docker desktop. Let's move to the Docker Compose file. And here you can see I added a volume section to it. The MSSQL underscore server underscore data is the name of the volume. This name can be anything. Then I have to map it to the default directory of SQL Server in the container. This directory is /var/op/mssql. Save this file. Now I run the app from Visual Studio. This will spin new containers of the app with volumes mounted to the SQL Server container. Obviously, we will get an error since the database is not created on the server. Ignore it for the time being. I will be creating the database in just a moment by running Entity Framework Core migration commands. Let's see the Docker desktop. The new container of the app are created. To be precise, Visual Studio has run the docker-compose build command to create the two containers of the two projects which this app needs. This is the volumes which is containing the SQL Server file. This volume is mounted to the SQL Server running from the Docker container. Now go to the app settings.json file and change the data source value from SQL data to localhost, 1440. This is necessary since I will be running migration commands. Save this file. Next, right-click the Docker CRUD project and select Set as Startup Project. Then delete the migrations folder. Open the Package Manager console window and run the first command, which is add-migration migration1. Migration 1 is the name of the migration and can be anything. The second command to run is update-database. This will create the database of our app. Wait for a few seconds for this command to complete. And you can see now it has finished. So this means the movie database is created. I set the docker-compose project to startup project once again. Right click on it and select set as startup project. The final thing to do is change the localhost, 1440 back to SQL data, which is the name of the SQL Server service. In the docker-compose.yml file, run the app from Visual Studio again. You can see the app is up and running properly. I add movies from the app. This time the movies are stored on the SQL Server database where volumes are also mounted. So the database is safe from any container crash. Let's check this. I delete the container of the app from Docker desktop. Let's again run the app from Visual Studio. The app is up without any problem, and also it is showing the movies. This means the database is restored automatically from the Docker volumes. So our database is now successfully persisted, and this is the volumes where all the SQL files along with the database files are stored. And this is the movie DB, MDF and LDF files. We can save the files by right clicking on it and select save as. So congrats, we have successfully applied Docker volumes to our SQL Server container, and The database is now persisted.